Okay, hello and welcome to the Parsha class. Parsha Vayikra, first Parsha in Sefer Vayikra, 5786. We're looking at the commentary of the Taam Dagan, see if there's any lessons in food, whether it's nutrition, health, brachot, halacha, kashrut, you name it. So let's see what we can find. And with no further ado, let's get into the source material. Taam Dagan, Vayikra, in which the Torah teaches lessons in the importance of slaughter, the mitzvah of chadash, the significance of salt, and more. So let's get right into it. Sefer Vayikra begins with the word Vayikra, conveniently enough. So Hashem called El Moshe v'yidaber Hashem elav. Hashem calls Moshe, he speaks to him, ba'ol moed lemor, in the ol moed, and he says, and Rashi, there's a few Rashis on this verse talking about the special relationship that Moshe had to Hashem. Moshe and Hashem spoke to each other almost like a person would speak to another person, and it was a beautiful relationship. And it's Hashem loves him, loves all of us, but he showed a deep love and appreciation for the things Moshe does by calling to him and speaking to him very clearly. And it says here, there's a midrash that says that Hashem calls Moshe's mission to teach the Jews about Tuma and Tahara, which is why he's calling him, right? Vayikra Hashem, right? Hashem is calling Moshe, what for? To teach him lessons. V'yidaber Hashem elav b'ol moed. He's going to teach them in the ol moed certain things. What's he going to teach him? What we're about to see, the rest of Sefer Vayikra, presumably. And that includes, at least in the beginning, certainly laws about being pure and laws about staying away from impurity, tuma and tahara. And the midrash seems to say that his mission of teaching about tuma and tahara is actually greater than his previous mission of splitting the sea. Oh, how could that be? He saved 3 million people. Right? Miracles happen through his arms. And this is greater. I mean, anybody can. I'm teaching right now. I mean, there's no comparison. Teaching Tumah Tahara seems like so far removed from great miracles and saving millions of people. No, it says the midrash seems to say that it's even greater. Why is that? So the Znaim, the Torah explains, because a teacher who can teach the details of Tumah Tahara is greater than splitting the sea. It's not just what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. If you're able to give it over correctly, if people understand, if people are learning lessons about how to conduct themselves and to get closer to Hashem, that's the goal. What's the point of living, really, if you can't get closer to Hashem? So all these millions of people who were saved, great, good, but like, what's to what end? And if there's no Torah, then there's really very little other reason to work on anything. Sounds a little bit dark, and I apologize, but that's what many of the Muslims Forum talk about, is that your goal in life, and we spoke about this before, is to better yourself, to make this world a place of Kiddush Hashem. So how are you going to do that without Torah? How are you going to better yourself? That's what Torah is for. And next pasuk says, he tells him exactly what to do. The Ber Bnei Israel, speak to the Jewish people. Amarta Alehem, speak to them. Adam ki yakriv mikem karban lashem. When a person, an Adam, makes a sacrifice to Hashem, mina behemo, mina bakar, whether it's from the cattle or for the flocks, it's from the sheep, min hatzon, from the herds, takrivu et karbanachem. He's going to offer. The person will offer his offerings. So why, again, famous question, why is Hold on a second. This is an interesting thing. Give me a second. There's might be a typo here. Um, huh. Interesting. Right. So, since control of all living things belong to Hashem, Hashem in this verse calls a man a it should be Adam, should be the word of Hashem is say specifically Adam. I think I have to look this up, but it looks like that's what it says. Let's fix that. So Hashem calls a person who brings a sacrifice an Adam, right? Uh, oh, see, I know. Okay, sorry. Fix that. Why? Why is it called an Adam? To explicitly give permission to use his animals for sacrifices. In regard to sacrifices, chayot, by the way, undomesticated animals are not in the same category as behemoth, as domesticated animals. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. We've seen that before, by the way. But not everything that's living can be brought as a sacrifice, including fish and wild animals. You can't bring a deer as a sacrifice. You can't bring a fish, as kosher as it might be. That cannot be a sacrifice. All right, we'll review that later. Skip a few verses to chapter 1, verse 5. V'shachat et ben abakar lifnei Hashem. The bull has to be slaughtered in front of Hashem. V'krivu b'nei Aaron hakohanim et hadam. And the sons of Aaron, in other words, the Kohanim, should now bring this blood. And what do? Zarku et hadam al hamizbeach. They're supposed to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach, saviv, all around, which actually doesn't mean all around. We learned that it's supposed to be on each opposite, or on just the two opposite corners. And by being on the two opposite corners, it hits four walls, right? Because each corner has two walls. So then, therefore, that happens. Share petach oel moed in the, and this mizbeach is at the opening of the tent of meeting. So Hashem in this verse mentions blood twice, right? Shechadet ben abakar l'fnei Hashem bekrive bnei Aaron kohanim et hadam zarku et hadam. So dam is mentioned twice, blood is mentioned twice. Why? It's to indicate that an accidental mixture of blood for an Ola offering with the blood of another should be from an Ola offering. This is why we do this. With the blood of another offering would not invalidate their combined blood being sprinkled on the Mizbeach. That's why it says blood twice. This blood and that blood sprinkled together, even though only the Ola's blood needs to be sprinkled. In Halacha, this is a concept known as min b'mino, as Rashi points out, a type of food mixture that mixes in with the same type of food. Now that we're on the subject, it's worth discussing this and some of the important concepts regarding bittul with this concept of min b'mino. So the type of food is determined. Hold on. Let's see. A lot of corrections today. I apologize. Right, the type of food is determined by its name rather than its taste. Right, so if something is called, if something's called bacon and something's called salmon, it doesn't matter if they taste. It doesn't matter if they have different names. If for whatever the reason they taste alike, probably requires some terrible experiments in the kitchen for that to happen. But if they taste alike, then it's considered a min b'mino. Sorry, the other way around. If they have different names, that's all that matters. Doesn't matter if they taste alike. Thus, the meat of different species of birds or different species of fish would not be considered min b'mino. However, pieces of the same fish or of the same type of fruit, of which some are dried and some are pickled, are min b'mino, right? They're the same. They're the same species. They're the same name, right? Even various parts of the same animal, the heart, the beef, they're not are not min b'mino of the vital. Of course, not everybody agrees with these. So this is that's the psak of the Aruch HaShulchan, and there's a lot more to talk about in regard to that halacha. I think we'll get back to it in some point. But this verse is one of the sources for the law that an animal needs to be slaughtered in order for its meat to be kosher. We don't have anywhere where it explicitly says as a mitzvah that you cannot eat meat that is not slaughtered, but that is part of the laws of kashrut. And this is one of the sources for it, according to the Gemara in Chulin 27a. The fats beneath the diaphragm are called pader, and the reason for that is because they're spread out as a division, a parad between the organs. Gentile nobility would cover their roasted meats with this fat, and we therefore learn that this is the more respectful way to offer offerings. Just it looks nicer. It's more chashuv. And when we bring sacrifices, we want them to be as chashuv as possible. Chapter 1, verse 12. V'nitach oto lintachav ve'et rosho ve'et pidro. Just a moment. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this note probably belongs elsewhere, right? We don't have the word pader here. All right, so we said it already about the next verse. Good, fine. Good. All right, so the next verse says, "V'nitachoto lintachav." He has to be cut into this animal needs to be cut into pieces. Vet rosho vet pidro, its head and its fat. The aruch hakohen otam. The kohen brings it al ha'itzim, and puts it, arranges it on the fire, on the logs. Asher la'esh, that's on the fire. Asher al mizbeach, that is on the mizbeach. So it's an interesting kind of run-on sentence. It's right. He arranges this on the wood that is on the fire that is on the mizbeach. It's this belongs in a children's book. This sentence. Anyway, it's there's deeper reasons for this, just not for now. See, okay. By commanding that the animal's head and fats be brought together, Hashem is reminding the person bringing this offering that when people allow their heads to be with their fats, right, this combination of head on fat, or etc., their minds are focused on fulfilling their appetites, and when that happens, sin becomes the natural consequence. Says the Oznaim Torah. You just when you're focused on your physicality, and by the way, there's a lot of comments in these verses from the Oznaim Torah. He really focuses on the kashrut aspects and the lessons we can learn about food in this parsha, which is a very nice, convenient for me, and for us as we go through Taam Dagan. But so Rav Zalman Saratskin, Zechet Tzadik Livracha, is Schus Yagin Aleinu. So he's pointing out that by this kind of philosophy of feed me, then you're not really thinking about anything holy, and when that happens, the natural consequence is indeed misbehavior of different sorts. Yeah. Okay, just a moment. Let me think about feeding myself here a little bit. All right. The next comment we just read, although it belongs here probably. I'll review that later. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 14. Chapter 1, verse 14. Ve'im min ha'of. Right, so if somebody cannot afford a meat sacrifice, they can bring a bird sacrifice. Bird is treated differently than an animal, and not all birds can be brought as sacrifices. Karbonola Hashem ikriv et hatorim o bnei Yonah et karbono. That can be only from a Tor or a ben Yonah. What's a Tor? A Tor is usually translated as a dove, and a ben Yonah is a young pigeon. Now, pigeons and doves happen to be very much related, but there's basically a sweet spot where the bnei Yonah have to be before 1 year old, and a Tor has to be after 1 and before I think 2. So there's like a certain age that these things can be. And it's the comment here from the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim says that the reason why young pigeons are acceptable as sacrifices is either because they taste superior, they taste good, or because eating them can improve one's intelligence. I think that's the commentary of the Ramban. So an argument there, but either way, I guess again, part of this is supposed to teach us lessons in what to eat. These pigeons are not eaten here, right? These pigeons are placed on the mizbeach. This is an ola. It's completely burnt up, and nevertheless, it teaches us lessons about how to eat that they taste better. And they improve intelligence. By the way, that's not necessarily a stira. Sometimes what we naturally want to eat, the things that improve our taste, is actually what is healthier for us. It's very often we're under the impression that to be healthy, we have to eat something we don't like. That's not necessarily true. I mean, it takes effort, but you have to find foods that you like that are healthy for you. That's probably going to be better for you. Yeah. So chapter 1, verse 15, next verse. V'ikruv al kohen et hamizbeach. The kohen brings it close to the mizbeach. Malak et rosho. He nips off its head with his finger, right? It's a kind of a graphic thing to do. V'hiktir hamizbecha. He brings it he makes it into smoke on the mizbeach, on the altar. Nimtza damo al kira mizbeach, and then he squeezes his blood on the wall of the mizbeach. So you might ask yourself, as the Znaim L'Torah does, slaughter. Well, we talked about this already. Slaughter is a mitzvah. To make an animal kosher, you need to kill it. Part of shchita is that it's more or less a gentler way to kill an animal. Shchita requires a person to use a very, very sharp knife to cut it along its right across its neck in a way that kills, that stops its nerves. Sorry? Stops its a sciatic nerve from feeling anything. And then that's how you kill the animal. Just a moment. Okay, we're back. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Let me just double check that this is working. Sorry, give me a moment. I want to make sure you hear me. Check, check. All right. Sorry about that. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, Baruch Hashem. Chapter 1, verse 15. Right, so this bird's neck is it's pierced through with the fingernail of the Kohen. It's much more painful than the shechita of an animal. So although slaughter seems to allow an animal a less painful death, malika for birds does not seem to carry the same benefit. Recalling that this is a sin offering, and should thus remind the penitent sinner of the severity of the transgression by the animal substituting for the actual sinner, right? You're supposed to see the animal and say, there, but by the grace of God go I, right? That should be me instead of this poor animal. So it makes sense that for the offering to be treated painfully. So then why isn't the animal treated painfully? Why only the bird? So says the Znaim the Torah, the wealthier penitent's animal offering, on the other hand, is killed with the more gentle method of being slaughtered, because the rich, right? He's wealthy, he's rich, he can afford an animal. The rich, enjoying the pleasures of life as they do, fear any type of death, even though less painful kind. So they're shook just by the sacrifice itself, whether it's painful or not. The death of the animal moves them either way. That's not true for the poor. The poor don't mind death as much, I guess, according to this idea, unless it's painful, and so that they need the painful reminder, and that's why the bird is treated more painfully. Okay, chapter 1, verse 16. And again, this is not entirely related to food, and I know that. I hope I don't get too much hate mail about this, but I realize what the lessons that can be gained, especially related to food. Take it back to food on your own sometimes. So, for example, the idea of shchita is the animal is being killed more gently. That's something we need to do for the animal to be kosher to eat. That's an important thing to think about sometimes. When you're eating meat, you should have in mind that this meat has been killed for me, as painless as it might have been. I mean, it's not 100% painless, right? And yet here I am, right? I'm fine and in enjoying this meat that this animal gave it of its life for. Also, it's something to think about. That's how the Gentiles kill their animals without shechita, right? They bludgeon them and whatever else. It's a painful way to go, and we should. I don't know if we should, but I feel disgusted when I think about all those chickens in the Foster Farms package, right, or whatever non-kosher brand. I don't want to get sued by them or anything, but like, how did they get killed? How were they treated? And I'm not trying to be like some sort of revolutionary here or anything like that. It's just it's an important point to consider when you look at when you look at how the Torah designed our behavior. V'heishir et marato, next pasuk, benotzta hishlich ota isla mizbeach kedma el makom hadesha. So then he's going to take its crop. So it's it's mara, whatever that is. We're going to see what that is. It's crop with the feathers, and throw it beside the mizbeach on the east part in the place of the ashes. So he's not actually burning this, right? And one of the reasons is the Kohen throws away the bird's innards because its substance is composed of digested stolen food. It's a gross thing, and that's what Rashi says over there, is that it even comes from the word basically of grossness. It's digested food. And the worst thing about it isn't even what it's made from, but the fact that it was stolen, makes it even worse. Yeah. Okay. Chapter 1, verse 17. Next pasuk, right? The Shisa Oto kind of biknafav. He tears it by its wings. Lo yavdil, but he's not supposed to split it all the way. In other words, only the back of it is split open. The front of it remains connected. It's not split in half. V'hiktir eto hakohen hamizbeach, and the kohen shall place the smoke on the mizbeach. Al ha'itzim asher al ha'esh, on the wood that is on the fire. Olahu ishe reach nichoach laHashem. It is a burnt offering, an offering made by fire, sweet smell to Hashem. Now, Sweet smell to Hashem is an interesting phrase. Besides the fact that obviously Hashem doesn't smell things, he doesn't have a nose because he has no physical body, no need for good smells or anything like that. So what does it mean? So especially in this context of all places, where what are we burning? We're burning birds with their feathers, and feathers have a famously disgusting smell. Hashem in his Torah describes the otherwise famously vile smell of birds burning along with their feathers as a sweet smell. Why? Because one's expensive gift is equal to this modest gift of the poor person. Remember, this is the poor person gives the bird offering, as long as both have the same intention to please Hashem. Pleasing Hashem is the reach nichoach. Hashem is quote unquote happy when you do what he says to do. Whether you understand why you do it, you don't understand why you do it. Obviously, it's better to learn to understand why things are what they are. What's a chumrah? What's a minhag? What's tuma? What's non-kosher? Whatever. All the different rules. What's practical? What's common sense? All of it is stuff you can learn. Community standard, etc. I think I've given enough examples. So, I mean, I guess I'm just a little bit venting here based on certain comments that other quote-unquote rabbis have been making about different people's customs. It's a little frustrating that people don't know the difference between a custom and a halacha, and customs become halacha over time. And yes, that's going to affect how we celebrate a holiday, but it should not should interfere with somebody who doesn't keep that custom. I don't know why they have to dwell on it so much. But anyway, not going to get into it too much. I don't know how well this is going to age now that I'm thinking about it. All right, next chapter, chapter 2, verse 1. V'nefesh ki takriv karban mincha l'Hashem. Now, the person who's bringing the offering is called a soul, a nefesh. And this person brings a mincha to Hashem, a flower offering. We're explained that the flower offering is brought by somebody who can't afford a bird offering. And a bird offering is for the poor. So couldn't bring an animal, couldn't bring a bird, has to bring an offering because it's a sin offering. And so he brings she brings a meal offering, which is flour and oil. So it's mincha LaHashem, solet yeh karbano. It has to be fine flour. V'yatzak aleha shemen. He puts oil into it. V'natan aleha levona. And he also adds frankincense into it. It's a spice, not spice, an herb, right? Hashem in his Torah calls the poor person giving a flour offering a nefesh, right? It specifically says v'nefesh ki yakriv karban instead of adam, instead of ish. Why nefesh? Because the poor person needs to struggle in gathering together these ingredients, says the Balaturim. And so it is fair to say that such a person gave up. Is giving up of one's entire soul just to make this modest offering, right? So it's the whole soul, it's the nefesh. It's giving like the person's giving up the soul of that person, right? Hashem in his Torah describes the oil for the menorah as far more beaten and refined than this oil, which is usually eaten, right? The rest of this flour offering after a kmitza, after it's put on the mizbeach, the rest of that flour and oil is cooked and baked, whatever, and is eaten by the kohanim. So you might have to wonder to yourself, why is this oil basic, not extra virgin, and as opposed to the very, very refined and beaten oil that's used for the menorah, as it says in Shemot 27:20. So this is because Hashem as concerned as he is about what we eat, and I hope he's concerned because we've been giving lots of classes about this lately, all right, is more concerned with purity of wisdom and philosophy than purity of food. Some people think it is important to be particular about what food and drinks they put into their mouths and into the mouths of the people they love. They are attentively on guard, watching meticulously and making certain that they only ingest what is good for them and will not be unhealthy. But they're not equally particular about what they permissibly allow into their minds and into the minds of their children. They consume books and other kinds of entertainment that are unhealthy for their souls and confuse their philosophies, whereas the purity of philosophy and knowledge, like the oil for the menorah, should be without any dregs, right? Without any junk. And so that's the Znaim Latorah there. Again, Reb Zalman Sorotskin telling us lessons we can learn regarding food right here from our Parsha. All right, chapter 2, verse 11, very next verse, I think. Yeah, that's chapter, no, 10, sorry, 10 psukim later. That wouldn't be the same. Kol hamincha, asher takrivu Hashem, any mincha that you bring to Hashem, any of these flower offerings that you bring Hashem, lo ta'aseh chametz, you cannot make chametz out of them. This is a good relevant point to this time of the year, right? It's supposed to be these are matzah you're making. Ki kol seor v'chol dvash, any leavening, lo saktir memenu yishel Hashem, should not be used as a sacrifice to Hashem. So dvash we have as usually means honey. Here, though, we're saying that you can't use any kind of leavening or any kind of yeah, hold on, give me a second. All right, it says honey, right? But we're not just talking about honey, but any kind of sweet juice from fruit, any kind of fruit juice, basically. It's called davash. And you can't make, for example, that's one of the reasons why Ashkenazim are particular not to have egg matzah on Pesach, usually, right? Because that might be considered chametz, might be. And so we don't usually have it unless we need to, for health reasons, or Erev Pesach, you might be able to have it, even though it might be matzah. So it's a kind of a in-between sort of food, right? It's a little bit matzah, it's a little bit not. So next verse says, chapter 2, verse 12, Karban Reishi Takrivu Taam LaHashem El HaMizbeach Lo Yalu L'Reach Nichoch. Again, we have this sweet smell to Hashem. So as an offering of first fruit you may bring to Hashem, that they shall not come up for a sweet smell on the Mizbeach. So the two breads of Shavuot mark the end of the Yashan period of the old grain. That's when old grain starts being called old grain, and allows Chadash products to be brought. Right, these two breads allow Chadash products to be brought, and by the way, eaten. So which is why those people who are strict and keep the laws of Chadash, as the Torah says you should, and then most opinions even say that it's still relevant today. Ashkenazim, Sephardim for sure. Even if for Ashkenazim, there's only one minority opinion really that says you don't have to worry about Chadash in America, outside of Israel. But we many of us rely on that. Plus, there's the added reason that we can possibly rely on the fact that America usually still has old grain in its silos. When we get grain, it's usually made grain products. They're usually made from the old stock from the previous year. Now, to know for sure, then you have to consult the chart. The OU is making that easier this year. a lot more people seem to be taking on this this very beautiful halacha. Next verse, chapter 2, verse 13. V'chol karban minchatcha. Every meal offering that you're doing. B'melach timlach. You're supposed to salt it with salt. V'lo tashbit melach brit elokecha. And you should never shouldn't lose out on using salt for the covenant of Hashem, me'al minchatecha, on all of your meal offerings, al kol karbancha, on every offering at all, takriv melach, you're supposed to put salt. So aside from the meat being put on the mizbeach, and as we'll learn later on in Parsha Shlach, also this every korban requires nisuch hayayin. Well, not every, but many of the korbanot require a wine libation. One of the other things that they require, each of the meat offerings requires salt. And there's a requirement to have salt at one's table while eating a meal. It's not a coincidence. It would be lowly to offer bread without salt to Hashem, says the Ibn Ezra and the Ramban. Having salt on the Mizbeach represents generosity at our tables, says the Znaim L'Torah. Yeah. And the Gemara in Bracha tells us it is so important to have salt at one's table. Asking for it after saying the bracha on bread is not considered an interruption. It's part of the meal. It's a requirement. You need to have it. So it's not considered an interruption. As opposed to you say, you washed your hands, you're about to eat bread, and you start talking about, a football game or something. So that's an interruption. That has nothing to do with the thing. You talk about even some other food. Oh, you know what I saw today in the market? It's some nice bananas. Still an interruption. But if you're talking about salt, I'm not saying you should have a whole conversation about it. Himalayan salt, pink salt, sea salt, lab-grown salt, whatever. That's not that's not what you're supposed to do. But to say, can you please pass the salt? That you can do. Not considered interruption at all. Okay, chapter 3, verse 1. Im zevach shlamim karbano. And if you're bringing this offering of shlamim, it's usually translated as from the word shalom as a peace offering. Im mina bakar, if from the herd. Hu takriv im zachar im nekeva. You can bring a male or a female for the shlamim. Im zachar im nekeva tamim yakrivenu l'fnei Hashem. It should be pure and without blemish when you bring it to Hashem. The Torah finds it problematic for a person to eat purely out of appetite, since one appetite can lead to another, less healthy appetite. Right? As the Znaim Torah has been saying all along, that's the way, that's the path that leads to sin, is allowing for your appetites. Okay, chapter 3, verse 11. V'yikturu hakohen hamizbecha lechem ishe l'Hashem, and the Kohen shall make it smoke upon the mizbeach. It is the food of the offering made by fire to Hashem. Lechem here is food, even though lechem usually literally means bread, but because it's such a staple, it can mean any food at all. Chapter 3, verse 17. It's a statute forever. Wherever you settle. Whatever, all forbidden fats and all blood, thou shalt not eat. Right? Not kosher. Can't eat fat or blood. So first of all, it is forbidden for a Jew to eat blood, even though the Jews did not eat meat in the wilderness. So, sorry, should be they didn't eat meat in the wilderness unless it was part of a sacrifice. And by the way, it's an important point to make here, but I'm using sacrifice and offering interchangeably as translations, and according to Rav Hirsch, mistranslations really of the word korban, which is more like he calls it. He doesn't really have a name for it, but it's a thing that pulls something towards you that loves you. So it's kind of like a magnet, but the opposite. It's a magnet that works on the reverse. It's kind of like a force field, really. It pulls you in, it pulls you closer. So that's what we're trying to do when we're being a korban to Hashem. We're trying to get Hashem closer to us. We're trying, and that's kind of the idea. Um, right. So, uh, so back to this. It is forbidden for a Jew to eat blood, even though the Jews did not eat meat in the wilderness unless it was from a sacrifice, therefore making the prohibition against blood and fat a moot point. Hashem in his Torah mentions that this is relevant even during the era of the Beit HaMikdash. So even then, even when we were able to eat blood theoretically, it was available to us, it needed to be said that it was forbidden so that we wouldn't do it. The prohibition against eating fats and blood are still relevant outside of Eretz Yisrael. It's not just a one-time thing, and this is a lot of this is based on, by the way, on the Torah Kohanim that Rashi mentions, but doesn't quote. Interestingly, there's discussion of whether or not discussion about whether or not the eating of blood and fat can combine to be considered one sin. Is it different? Is it different sins? Thou shalt not eat fat. Thou shalt not eat blood. By the way, fat is forbidden fat. Chalev, not shuman. Shuman, regular fat of an animal, is allowed. The fat that's not is kind of a harder sort of fat. Most people haven't really experienced it since it's usually trabered off in the slaughterhouses. One could theoretically avoid one or the other out of personal preference rather than a sense of duty to Hashem. So it needs to be clear whether or not there is one sin or two sins for different foods. Forbidden fats must be similar enough to permitted fats for the subject to be the paradigm of the court making an error. Very often throughout Shas, throughout the Talmud, the classic error that a court might make and that a sage might disagree with the court about is whether something is permissible fat or forbidden fat. Now, I just a minute ago mentioned that supposedly this is an easy thing to discover, but I guess not. I guess they have to be similar enough, says the Gemara in Horiot, very beginning there. Relevant point, because that's the Gemara that talks about the court making mistakes, right? So the Gemara Horiot there says that they have to be similar enough in appearance and taste, or I guess not taste. You can't taste it until you know that it's kosher. So that's so I guess they look alike enough that they would be that's the fat that's forbidden. Chapter 4, verse 27. Im nefesh acha techta bishkaga, if any person, right? If any soul, I should say, sins through error by accident, me'am haaretz, from the people of the land, the asata achad mitzvot Hashem, and they did one of the sins that Hashem said not to do, asher lo ta'asena v'ashem, then he'll have to bring an asham, a guilt offering. And the Sforno writes that a sinner's forgiveness is helped by a Kohen's eating of the sin offering. Right, without eating the sin offering, that person is not forgiven. So again, food becomes a very important thing. Why that works, how that works, we'll hopefully get to in future classes as we're getting into the Vayikra. But that's just something to consider. It's something to know that that's part of the process that the Kohanim need to eat the sin offering, and by doing so, the sinner is forgiven. Next verse, chapter 5, verse 2. O nefesh asher taga b'chol davar tameh, or somebody who touches any unclean things, an impure thing. Impure. I don't like unclean. Impure thing, whether it's the nevelat chaya v'tameh tmea, or nevelat behema tmea, whether it's the carcass, the dead body of an unclean animal or cattle, doesn't matter. Or nevelat sheretz tame, or the dead body of a forbidden swarming thing, a rat, right? And then he didn't know that, and then he did something he's not supposed to do when he's tame, when he's impure. Let's say he went to the Beit HaMikdash. You can't go to the Beit HaMikdash in an impure state, but he didn't know he was impure. It was nighttime, and he was, fuddling about with his fingers on some nice feeling thing on the floor. He thought it was carpet. It turned out it was a dead rat. He doesn't know that yet, right? He doesn't know, but he finds out that maybe it was. Right? He comes back home and sees, oh, there's a dead rat next to my bed. And I was playing around with my fingers, stroking the carpet. And it turned out maybe it's not carpet, maybe it was a rat. Oi, what do I do? So he brings this sacrifice, the asham. Eating kodesh is a reason to bring an asham, right? If somebody eats something that's holy, that's one of the reasons to bring an asham. That's Rashi. If he forgot that he was impure, obviously. That's one of the situations. So again, food related. Chapters 5, verse 3, next few verses in a row. Oh, ki yiga betumat adam, or he touches some uncleanliness or impurity of a person. Sorry. Whatever the impurity is. With which he is impure. Right. So, im he yiga betumat adam lechol tumato asher yitma ba v'nela mimenu hu yada v'ashem. Once he finds out, then he has to bring the this asham offering. Eating the meat of a bird that was not shechted is forbidden, and the reason it's forbidden is because it also can produce tumah that way. That's what Rashi says in his comment here. Next verse, chapter 5, verse 4. On nefesh ki tishava levate b'sfatayim. Somebody he swore something, right? With his lips. La'ara or hativ, whether it's to do good or to do bad, right? Or anything he took on as an oath. And it was hidden from him. He didn't know, or he forgot, or something, right? Who yadav Hashem la'achad me'ela. And then if he once he finds out, he has to bring. Once he finds out about the possibility that this happened, he has to bring this asham offering. When swearing not to eat something, this is on the topic of he's swearing to do something. The Gemara in Shavuot 23b tells us that when he swears not to eat something, that the zayit, which we usually have used, and we've talked about this in class before, that a zayit is the minimum measurement of what's considered eating. Very relevant for this time of the year now with the Pesach Seder upon us in a few days, in a few weeks, less than 2 weeks. But even a mashu, even the smallest amount is forbidden. It's not the zayit like usual. When you swear, I'm not going to eat blank grapes or whatever, right? So become completely forbidden, even a little bit of them. Okay, let's get to the last two psukim that we'll study today. Chapter 5, verse 7. V'im lo tigayado deiseh, if you can't afford a lamb for this offering, he can bring for his offering, for his asham, either 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. L'Hashem, they're obviously for Hashem. Echad l'chatad ve'echad le'ola. One is a sin offering and one is an ola. One goes up completely in fire. Hashem treats one who eats what is pure while in a state of impurity leniently by his giving, by his giving, spell it correctly this time, multiple methods for atonement, should be 4. This is because this person is making an accidental mistake while attempting to perform the mitzvah of eating for the sake of heaven. All activities like eating and drinking can and should be directed toward the service of Hashem. So when a person is hungry or thirsty, that person should not just eat to merely satisfy that craving, but should intend to have the physical health to serve Hashem through the nutrition provided by that food or drink. This is the Shulchan Aruch. You thought that was that's not in the Torah, didn't you? That's the Shulchan Aruch outright in Orach Chaim 231:1. And our last verse for today, chapter 5, verse 17. V'im nefesh ki chata, when somebody sins, v'asata et mikol mitzvot Hashem, and somebody who does any of the mitzvot he's not supposed to do, and he breaks any of the commandments, ashol lo ta'asena, that he shouldn't do, lo yadav Hashem, he didn't know, and he brought an asham, v'nasa avono, and then he will bear his sin. So this verse is primarily dealing with the situation in which a person is not sure whether one transgressed an action punishable by karet. That's spiritual cutting off. That's the worst punishment the Torah has, even worse than death. But he did this by accident, as when a person has chelev and permitted fats available, ate one and is not sure whether that one is chelev by accident. Right. So Rav Yossi, and this quoted in Rashi, makes a statement to the effect that if Adam, first man, was so severely punished for eating from the one forbidden food, and Hashem's rewards are greater than his punishments, stands to reason that there is a great reward to avoiding eating the forbidden. Very important lesson for kashrut. And finally, a small sort of almost technical point. Since Hashem gave his Torah to us without vowels, the word mitzvot in the plural could be pronounced mitzvat in the singular. There's a dispute, therefore, amongst the sages whether the spelled or pronounced form has primacy, which is more important. Thus, a person may have to bring an asham talui, this offering, if 2 pieces of meat were what caused the person confusion, or just the correct identity of 1 piece. So either way, because it could be spelled, it's spelled like mitzvat in the singular. It doesn't have 2 vavs like mitzvot usually could, or maybe should. So therefore, it could be that it's supposed to be read this way, and then therefore, person who is who's in doubt about one food might have to bring the asham talui. I want to thank you for listening. I want to point out, unfortunately, because of time constraints, I'm not sure. I doubt if I'll be able to give a class next week on Parsha Tzav, although there's a lot to say, and so we'll have to resume after Pesach Meanwhile, though, on our YouTube page, and there's plenty of classes on Parsha Tzav for the previous years. I urge you to take a look at them or listen to them while you're doing whatever it is you're doing in preparation for this beautiful holiday of Pesach. Thank you for joining me, and have a good rest of your week. Take care.